Hi there, it's Jen and I'm the unapologetic reader. I was tagged by Acapella Books to do the reader habit tags, and the question sounded like so much fun to answer, and it'll let you guys get to know a little bit more about me and my reading habits. So here we go. Question number 1 is, do you have a certain place at home where you read? I don't, although if I'm reading at home, I usually end up reading here in this chair, and my bed is right next to it, and I'll sort of prop my feet up on the bed. I also usually read a little bit before I go to sleep, and sometimes I'll read downstairs. We have an L-shaped couch, and it sits right by a window, so if it's nice out, sometimes I like to go down there and stretch out on the couch and read. Question number 2, bookmark or random piece of paper? Yes, both. I don't think there's really any rhyme or reason to it. I usually use bookmarks for like larger, heavier books that I may only be reading at home and not carrying around with me, although I've taken bookmarks in books that I do carry around with me. If I start reading a new book on the whim, then I'm usually using the receipt or whatever I can find to act as a bookmark, which is really kind of silly because I have quite a lot of bookmarks, so whatever I can grab, that's what I use. Question number 3, can you just stop reading, or do you have to read a certain number of pages? On e-readers, I can pretty much stop anywhere, same with audiobooks. If I'm reading a physical book, I usually like to try to get to the end of a chapter or at least to a page break, but if something comes up, I mean, obviously I just stop wherever. If I have to kind of stop in the middle of a chapter or not really at a page break, when I pick the book back up, I notice that sometimes I'll go back to the beginning of that page, or if I can't remember what page I was on, I might go just to the page before and kind of catch myself up with where I'm at. So yeah, e-readers and audiobooks, pretty much I can stop anywhere. Physical books, I'd like to get to the end of a chapter if I can. Question number 4, do you eat or drink while reading? Both. I always have to have something to drink when I'm reading because I don't want to stop once I get started reading to go get something to drink, and I eat a lot during lunch breaks, and even sometimes during dinner I'll read. Question number 5, multitasking, music or TV while reading? No to TV. I get sucked into watching the television even if it's not something I care about. I think that visual clamor for attention is just too much for me to ignore. But I usually need at least music, if not some kind of white noise in the background. So it's hard for me to read if it's totally drop dead silent. Now, I usually listen to instrumental music when I'm reading, or if it's music with words, I'll turn it down really low so it almost becomes like white noise in the background. But any mix of those is fine. And if I'm reading in a public place, I don't need music because I just use the noise of people around me to kind of act as that white noise buffer. Question number 6, one book at a time or several at a time? Almost always several at a time in several formats as well. I went through a phase where I tried to just read one book at a time. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I could do it, but it was really a strain for me. It didn't feel really comfortable. It definitely wasn't for me. I'm almost always listening to a book, sometimes several. I'm usually reading a book on the e-reader. E-reader, I'll tend to just read one book at a time on that. And then physical books, I'm usually reading several, and they might span across genres. Some of them might be like, I have some big heavy books that I definitely wouldn't want to take on the train or the bus with me, and I only read those at home, but I don't want to be left without a physical book to read, so that's when I pick up other titles. I think at the most I was reading 13 books at one time, and I don't usually do that. I think usually I hover around 4 to 6 books at a time that I'm reading. Question number 7, reading at home or everywhere? Everywhere. I have not found a place that I couldn't read. So I always have books with me, and I take any chance I get to read. I think some of that might be why I read as much as I do. A lot of people, when they hear how many books I read, which I don't think is pretty crazy in a year, they are kind of like, oh wow, that must be all you do. And I do other things too, but I think people don't realize how much they can read if they just fit it in anywhere they can. So I read on buses, I read on trains, I can read in the car if somebody else is driving. I read on my breaks at work sometimes. Sometimes I finish work before my carpool buddy does, and so I'll read while I'm waiting for her. Yeah, I pretty much read anywhere I can get. If space travel were an option, I'm sure I would read on spaceships too. Question number 8. Reading out loud or silently in your head? Pretty much silently in my head. I think I'd only read out loud if I was reading to like one of my nieces or nephews, or if I read something particularly funny I wanted to share with somebody who was with me at the time. I might read that out loud to them, but that would be like a short little passage. Question number 9. Do you read ahead or do you skip pages? I touched on this in my last video. I try not to read ahead, but sometimes I do. If I'm really invested in a character and I want to find out what's going to happen to them. As far as skipping pages, ironically, I did it when I wasn't reading a physical book. It was an audiobook that I was listening to, and I really liked the series as a whole. I liked the book as a whole, but there was this long passage in the middle of it. When I checked, the physical book was probably about 200 or 300 pages or so, where the main characters are on a ship, and you could tell the author did a lot of research into how sailing and ships at that time worked, because there was a lot of nautical jargon, and I did not care. I didn't care how all the ropes were tied. I didn't care how everything worked on the ship. I did not care about all of that. That was really boring, and it didn't seem to me like there was a whole lot happening. So for the first time ever in my life, I just skipped ahead through those chunks. If something really important happened during them, oh well. I had a friend who read the same book, and she mentioned that there was some foreshadowing of some of the political stuff that was going on that did happen during that time, but I mean, all was revealed in the end and they explained it anyway, so I didn't think I lost anything. But for the most part, I really try not to do that. Sometimes if I'm reading a book that's got really graphic descriptions of gory scenes, like in a fight scene or something, I might skim over that just because I don't necessarily need all the details about how the monster is filleting the person that is meeting their untimely demise. But for the most part, I just read it. If I find that I want to skip huge chunks of a book over and over again, I'm probably going to put the book down and not finish it, because that is a bad sign for the book. Question 10. Breaking the spine or keeping it like new? I do break the spines on my paperbacks a lot. Honestly, I don't know how people read the books and don't do that. I think the stress of trying to accomplish that would take away from my enjoyment of reading the book. Hardbacks, I think it's pretty tough to break the spines. Now, if I'm borrowing a book from somebody else to read, I do kind of take note of the condition that that book is in, and if they say they've read that book, that particular copy, and there are no marks on the spine, I might just say thank you very much, but I'll get the e-reader or I'll borrow it somewhere else, because I know I'm not going to be able to keep the spine in the same condition, and I don't know if that's a thing for them, and I would hate to, in someone else's eyes, ruin their book. So I'm very respectful of other people's property and the condition they want to keep those books in, but for me, man, I like take that front cover and I fold it back behind it and I break that sucker in. Question number 11, do you write in your books? I didn't used to do this. I actually didn't know that this was a thing. I don't know how. And it was during a Gilmore Girls episode, when it's one of the very early ones, and Rory is just getting to know Jessie, and he sort of borrows one of her books and then he gives it back to her, and he's written a lot of notes in it, and I was like, huh, that's a thing. I don't do it too much, and I think the majority of writing that I do in books is I'm underlining passages that I really like, or quotes that I like or want to include in a review, and then I'll kind of put a little post-it note in it to mark the spot. But I don't do it a whole lot, and if I'm really hooked in a book like the big fantasy books and I'm going to town, I may not make a single mark in it because I am just getting through the story. Question 12, who do you tag? This is a pretty old tag that's been circulating. I'll link down below what I believe is the original tag, or the original video for this. I guess if you haven't done this tag, feel free to do it. And even if you have done it, I mean, this tag is old enough that maybe your reading habits have changed. I know my reading habits have changed from when I first started reading to when I read now, and who knows, in a few years I may have completely different reading habits even then. So if you did this tag but you feel like maybe you'd like to change your answers to some of these questions, then I tag you, Pikachu. Go ahead and give this tag a shot, and if you do, leave a comment, let me know. I'd love to check it out. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already but you like what you see, I'd love it if you subscribed, and that way you'll know when I put more videos up. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!